What it really does is captures the spirit of the format, which is that you're giving more opportunities for cards to see play.
Distraction makers.
The rules committee is gone. Wizards of the Coast has taken over the format, and Wizards of the Coast immediately is announcing a tier list for Commander, where they have tiers 1 through 4.
Yeah.
1 being the lowest power, 4 being the highest power. And immediately I'm thinking, oh my God, finally we are creating a system that will make the rules an impartial third party again.
Before we start talking about the latest and greatest drama and Magic news, please, if you like our videos and our content, give us a little like and subscribe. And also, if you are interested in game design or just want to chat about games or whatever, you can join our Discord. You can find a link down below. And today's video is brought to you by...
I have a game coming out. Bullets and Teeth and Aliens is going to be on Kickstarter soon. It's a co-op card game for 2 to 5 players where you are blasting space bugs. So if that sounds cool to you, you can check it out on the link in the description. Get notified when the Kickstarter goes live.
And back to the video.
They're basically saying, hey, we're going to filter cards into these tiers for you so that you can have a better understanding of what power level your deck is. This has been an extremely fraught problem in the Commander community that nobody can really figure out how to have good games because different interpretations of all this stuff are happening all the time.
And the rules committee always kind of left it up to its rule 0, its house rules, its power level for your deck. It's, you know, point systems have been developed for this, and Wizards right away, one day in, is like tier system.
Right. Yeah. And they, you know, we used to have like a power level 1 through 10 system, which didn't work at all. And so Wizards is basically saying, all right, we have 4 tiers. We're going to curate those tiers. And I think effectively what they've done is they've created 4 formats for Commander, right? They have tier 1, which is essentially precons, tier 2, which is probably going to be considered low power, tier 3, which is probably considered high power, and tier 4, I would imagine, is probably going to be CEDH equivalent. Whether or not they just had a fireside chat about it that we watched, and it sounded like that right now they're not thinking that CEDH is its own tier, but they are open to the idea that
if CEDH was a tier, it would probably be 4.
It would either be 4 or 5.
Or 5,
if they end up doing another tier,
which is fantastic.
Yeah,
because
I think,
to us, I mean, we've always kind of talked about how you can't have you can't have a game, right, that can be played in an optimal way and play with competitive intent without giving them a seat at the table.
Right, and Aaron Forsyth said something that I agree 100% with in the fireside chat. Is that what they're called?
I don't know.
Whatever.
Weekly Magic.
Their chat. Whatever. The Aaron Forsyth says systems ban lists are to deal with the most extreme, right? They have to incorporate and be based around the most extreme things possible, and you have to work backwards from there.
Right, because otherwise you're like there's nowhere to aim, right? You're aiming on a completely what you have to do at that point is you sort of crunch the entire experience into this one situation, right? And you're saying the decks that we consider a 6 to an 8 on our vague scale, that's the cards we're banning for on the top end, which would be like on the 8s or whatever.
Right, and at this point, Commander has grown so large that you have people that want to play at all these different power levels, and if you have a rules committee that's governing for a specific type of play, you're leaving all these other people out, right? So I think clearly out of the gate, Wizards of the Coast saying, hey, we want to be as inclusive as we can, but we want to give guidance and a system with a philosophy and a methodology to facilitate good experiences based on the way that you want to play. The one major critique that I've heard with the system is that let's say you have a deck that belongs in tier 2, but you're playing one card that is in tier 4. And there's two answers to that problem. One is if you're playing in some kind of sanctioned event or at a game store where the game store has said, hey, we're playing tier 2.
Yeah.
You can't play that. You can't play the card.
Yeah.
Right? Clear, super clear, easy. Card can't be there. Yeah. If you're playing at your table at home or with friends, whatever, you're playing just casually at a game store.
Ask them if it's cool.
That's when Rule 0 comes in. Yeah. Rule 0 is not first, right? And I think that was part of the issue before, is that now rule 0, the tier list is first, and rule 0 is, hey, everybody, are we okay with me playing this one card? And here's the reasons why.
And I think that this is the misrepresentation that people are having of them discussing this tier list. Is I think people have been so consumed with this like commander culture that they believe that rule 0 is actually part of the game, which rule 0, by the way, is just house rules that in any game can have that. You can take any game and decide that you want to play it a different way. It's not different because it's Magic. So instead, they're just saying prior to rule 0, these are the more structured rules so that you guys can ideally have a more balanced game. But if you guys want to talk about it and you want to play whatever decks, then do whatever you want, which is exactly how casual Magic worked prior to Commander being the primary way that casual players played.
Right. And I really do think that the biggest boon here is for game stores. It's for event organizers.
Yep.
It's that they can say, hey, this is a tier 3 event, and this is what tier 3 means, and these are the cards that are allowed, and if it's in tier 4, you can't play it. Period. Super easy. Now you can play with randoms, and everybody's on the same page.
Yes. You have a competitive history and a competitive background. You like to create more efficient decks, right? But
guess.
What it allows you to do is create a more efficient deck for a tier that players are more comfortable playing in, meaning that you might have a higher efficiency of a tier 1 deck, but because it's tier 1 and the rest of our decks are in tier 1, ideally we're going to be crunched closer in power level to one another.
So
maybe tier 2 is probably better in that, but
okay. This is where I could see some criticism show up.
Okay, sure.
And it is that the tier lists create a ceiling.
Yeah.
Where previously there really wasn't one.
Right.
So you will have players that if you're saying, okay, tier 1, all right, well, that just excludes everything that's in tier 4, 3, and 2. But everything that's not excluded by those, I can play up to that line. And I think that's great.
I think it's great. It's going to expose the truth that has always been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do worry that we will see, basically we'll have 4 metagames of different power levels.
That's what's going to happen.
But I do believe that this does make the format potentially more competitive-minded, but I think that's in line with what Magic is as a game. So for me, that's not a problem. But I do wonder about, all right, well, how are they going to facilitate a tier 1 experience that allows for decks that don't really want to win the game? They're just like a fun experience to be had while you have other people in tier 1 that are trying to win the game. And that was always a problem before.
Right.
This doesn't solve that problem, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think it doesn't solve the problem, but I do think that it potentially reduces the impact that players could have, right? Where it's like someone could still bring a deck to the table that they think is a 7, but is clearly not a 7 in comparison to the rest of the people at that table. Right. And so this at least, right, like if you're a better Magic player and a better deck builder, you're still probably going to win more often because you're just more skilled at the game, if that's your goal.
Well, and I will say that they have mentioned that the tiers are going to be, I think that Aaron Forsyth mentioned that it's probably not possible for them to, in tiers like 2 and 1, to like list out all of the cards, right? Yeah. Tier 1 would just be like all of the cards of Magic that aren't on tier 3 and 4, where I think it's going to be more of like a philosophy, right? Like tier 1 is probably going to be, fun, pre-con, your lowest power format, right? Yeah. And then tier 2 is going to be effectively low power, but is it more competitive minded? I don't know how they're going to quite handle that.
Yeah. So we were kind of speculating on this a little bit, and it sounded like they kind of were soft confirming that this might be the direction they go in, which is, and I actually think it's very smart, is that players are used to talking about Commander not on a level of power. They believe it's a level of power, but it's not really a level of power. It's actually play patterns. Yeah. So when players think of a high-powered deck, what it usually is not high power, but it's usually some sort of a negative play pattern. Or it could be high-powered.
Not negative, right? It's just a play pattern.
Play pattern, right? But people associate it as being negative, right? Land destruction is not exactly favored amongst casual players, right? And so it sounds like they are organizing things as in tandem as best as possible with like what is perceived level of power, as well as the ability to construct certain archetypes of decks.
Right. I think that it's play pattern, consistency, and power. I think are probably the 3 pillars of the list, right? Where The further up the list you go, the more powerful, the more consistent, and the more negative play patterns you would experience. Where tier 4 is just all out, no holds barred other than the ban list. And then tier 3, you're probably pulling back some of those play patterns and some of that consistency and some of that power. So something like Mana Crypt, maybe, we don't know, might be in tier 4, but not in tier 3. Right, where something like, I don't know, Lotus Petal, I think they even mentioned it specifically. I don't remember if they mentioned tier 2 or 3, but somewhere in there. Like Lotus Petal is essentially a treasure. It's not nearly as powerful as even something like Chromox, debatably. But we can kind of see how we can't just necessarily say that all 0 mana cost mana rocks, like cards that give you mana, artifacts that give you mana, we can't just say all of them are in tier 3. Where do the signets and talismans fall? Yeah. Probably tier 1, right? These are cards that we see in precons. They also did mention Soul Ring, of course. They're not going to be banning it. It's in every precon.
It's not just surprising.
It's here.
Yeah.
You could tell Aaron Forsyth is frustrated with Soul Ring, and he said he's made his peace with it, which means that it's here to stay.
I know. His face when they were talking about it, he literally did this.
I know.
And talked about making peace with it, and I was like, yeah, all right,
yeah,
I get it.
Yeah,
Pro Tour, I understand.
I mean, look, if someone's going to understand power level, it's probably going to be Aaron Forsyth,
right? So. I think it's not one. I think it's the smart decision to just just keep it there.
Invalidate every precon
at this point, right? Yeah, at this point, they've made their bed, so to speak, with Soul Ring. I also think having a fast mana rock in everyone's deck as just an auto insert, even at a smaller table, it still creates those exciting moments, right? It's just not a chain of exciting moments like Mana Crypt could have created with other manas.
Okay, yeah, we don't need to get into that. But what I will say is we liken Commander a lot to Smash Bros, right? Where Smash Bros can be played at various levels of random to 1v1, no items, competitive on only one stage or something, right? So I think that Soul Ring stands out as something that increases explosive variance, and I think at a low power table where everybody's trying to have fun, that can be exciting.
It's the home run bat dropping,
right. It's the home run bat,
or it's the
hammer,
the hammer. Yeah.
You drop the hammer, you drop the Soul Ring,
right. And everyone goes, "Oh, get away!
No.
He's got the Soul Ring."
Right, and you become a target.
And then you become a target, and then it's fun.
This is part of, I think, a casual experience, and not necessarily a bad one.
And I think that what's funny is when people are concerned about what's going to change with this format, when we're looking at the possibilities of, based off of the example cards that they showed for the tier 4 and tier 3 and tier 2, which albeit it's not a lot so far.
No, this is all very much still new.
So this is speculation.
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised if tier 1 is primarily focused on the play patterns that we've talked about that casual players want Commander to be, and are viewing as being the ideal way of playing Commander, or the fun way, which is basically get lots of resources, card advantage, mana, whatever, and then swing with your dorks. There's not going to be instant wins, probably. There's not going to be infinite combos, probably. It's going to be very on the board. It's very, fair, quote unquote, gameplay in those players' eyes. And so, I really only see this as being a good thing.
Yeah,
it might be a little bumpy at first,
right. But so giving players tools to self-select, I think is exactly what the format needs, right? You need a way to say, I'm a tier 1, I'm a tier 3 player, whatever, or my deck is a tier 1, is a tier 2, is a tier 3. You need to be able to do that, to self-select and have a meaningful game of Magic. In order for a casual game to be compelling, you need to be able to, for players at various skill levels, to have meaningful games. Here we go, right? The game itself has a hard time facilitating that within its structures, so we need to add an additional tool to the structures of the game to facilitate those experiences. That's what we're talking about here. Also, I will mention that apparently Pokemon, competitive Pokemon, were the game, not the card game.
Not the card game.
Yeah, which I was misinformed at first. They have a tier list like this as well, and they've been using it to much success. A lot of players enjoy this experience. The 4 tiers apparently, and we just were talking about this in the Discord. I'm new to this. I don't play competitive Pokemon. Some people in the Discord were chiming in and that they do, and so I think that the tiers now are Ubers, which is like everything that's not banned.
Okay.
Overused, which is like probably like a tier 3, right? We're like the next step down. Underused, which would be like a tier 2, and then never used, which would be like a popper format or something that, you know, and these are all based on tournament like appearances, right? So this is very much guided by tournament results. So it's not a 1-to-1 here. But it does sound like Wizards of the Coast is going to do their best to gather data on what is actually happening in the format, which is great because now
they can actually gather data.
They can actually gather the data from organized play events, commander cons, where you sit down, you're going to play in a league or something. Maybe there's a weekly commander leagues that are at various tiers, and they're going to know these are the decks that are getting played at those tiers. These are the cards that are showing up all the time. These are the play patterns. This is who's winning. This is who's losing.
It's going to be amazing. I think they have an opportunity to make this very good.
Yep.
Because imagine,
and they have the resources to do it.
And they have the resources to do it. Yeah.
Okay. One more thing about the rules committee, real quick. These were 5 people. Look. I have a lot of respect for them for stepping up and trying to handle this immense beast of a format that is flawed and strange, and there's so many different people trying to pull in all these different directions.
Yeah.
But you had a team of 5 volunteers who were doing this like in their spare time.
Yeah. I don't even know if they necessarily had the power to be able to tell Wizards that they would want a tier system like this, right?
Well, it sounds like they may have been working on this
right, but
before they decided to hand it over.
You know, it's like different if they were trying to work on it with Wizards and like needed their permission, you know, and there's more back and forth and stuff, as opposed to it just being like a team that is dedicated full-time designers to creating something like this. Like, yeah, it sort of frees it up. It unlocks the potential. And you're giving it to, I think, very competent designers. They've been doing this for many years.
Right. We're talking, Gavin Verhey is going to be, I think, kind of heading up this entire department. And he's saying that there's like 12 designers that work at Wizards of the Coast right now that are focused solely on Commander. So you're going to have 12 people who all day, every day are thinking about this format.
And more than likely, with more structure...
data.
I think they're going to
resources.
actually, that team's probably going to grow. Anyone that is normally playing casual, right, depending on what they view as casual, they can show up to any event. It could be a casual, you know, Friday night Magic thing or whatever. They could show up and be like, oh, where's the tier 2 table, right? And you can find it and you go there. The problem is you won't have anyone to blame but yourself now. If you lose. And we have a whole video where we talked about Rule 0 and how it kind of it stunts growth. So
and this gives a clear pathway for growth, which I think is also great.
Yeah.
Is that I started with
work
a
your way up
pre-con
the chain.
in tier 1. I can work my way up if that's what I want to do. And you can self-select and stop whenever you want and stay in the tier that you're in as long as you're having a good time. The other criticism that I've heard a lot of is that this will create sort of bad incentives for Wizards because they're going to be creating new staples at different tiers, right? So let's play a hypothetical, and they're like, all right, tier 4 is the jeweled lotus, tier 3 is like the brass lotus.
Sure.
Here,
it's like actually gonna. It's platinum lotus because they're not gonna do jeweled lotus again because that was a mistake.
Right.
So
platinum
lotus, and then gold lotus, silver lotus,
wood lotus, right? So. Look, it's a possibility. But guess what that does, right? We now have increased the supply of staples, and that we have segmented off the people that would want those staples, which means the price of those will come down. Now, Wizards of the Coast will probably temper how many of these they're printing to try to keep these valuable. This is not a bad thing.
No, I don't think so at all.
I am mostly pro-proxy, but what I will say is that when you're not participating in the secondary market as a player, you're not supporting game stores. This is a big problem in that game stores are making most of their money through singles. And if everyone decided that we were just going to proxy everything, we don't have a game anymore.
Right.
So you have certain players that spend a lot of money on the game, People that don't, those people are your friend. Okay? They are making it so it is kind of a free-to-play model in a way, right? Where you have some whales that are spending a lot of money and you have other players that are spending almost no money. And the two of those together end up balancing out to enough money to make the game continue to exist. But if we start moving in this direction of nobody buying any cards, nobody paying entry fees to events, there's no way to gather any of this money, the community starts to fall apart. There's no place to play anymore. Stores can't exist. Wizards That Goes can't exist. The format, cards are done. Like, it's over. So I only see this as a good thing. I think that it will spread the player base out in terms of the chase cards that they're going after, right? It's not going to be everybody trying to get Rhystic Study. It's not going to be everybody trying to get Cyclonic Rift.
But that's what's so great. Is it's exactly what you're saying. If not everybody's trying to get Rhystic Study, right? Yeah. Because that's a tier 4 or whatever it ends up being, then goes down.
Right. Sure. They can make a Jeweled Lotus at every tier, right? Like we laid out. But guess what? Now a fraction of the people are trying to get Jeweled Lotus, a fraction of the people are trying to get,
It also, it makes it so much easier when you end up deck constructing. Like, the first thing we said after we were done watching this talk is we were like, we want to make decks now, because that's so exciting that now you actually have this full structure that is, I want to make this type of deck for this type of tier. And for game nights, you have one deck of every tier if that's what you care about or whatever. Yeah. And so, what tier are we going to play? Oh, let's play 3. Oh yeah, I got this tier 3 deck.
I think this is also great for content creators in a bunch of different ways. Yeah. One is, all right, well, if your channel specializes in a tier now, you're gathering, the people that play at that tier. If you're a deck builder and you're going to build decks, you can build at the deck at tier 1, 2, 3, 4. It just gives you more stuff to be thinking about. It gives you 4 different formats instead of 1 now, where everybody is chasing the Mana Crypts, the Rhystic Studies, the Smothering Tithes, that stuff. That's all going to be in tier 4 now. So what are those cards going to be for tier 3, 2, and 1?
And I think what's going to be crazy is that if you go by this structure and you humor wizards and, look, this is, it's a lie, because we don't have to go by this, right? You could just keep doing what you're doing. But if you decide to go by the wizard sanctioned version of this format and stuff like that, then I think it's going to be really exciting, because we essentially are going to have 3 tiers that are going to have a meta, right? There's going to be a new format for this.
There'll be 4 different metas for Commander now.
So yeah, it will kind of be okay, what is the new Smothering Tides? What is, what's the best commander for this tier or whatever? And I think that's exciting.
What it really does is captures the spirit of the format, which is that you're giving more opportunities for cards to see play, right? And that what cards is Rhystic Study crowding out? We don't even know yet. What about Cyclonic Rift? We don't know. Also, there's a real clear way now to say, I don't want to experience stacks, right? Yeah. Stacks can be tier 3 and 4. So I stay in 2.
Right.
That way I know I don't have to play against stacks.
Yeah. If that's not what you like, then you just stick to that specific tier, right? Tier 1 to tier 2 is going to be your more casual, build up your card advantage / mana and go and swing at each other type of games. And then if you want to get a little more competitive, then get into the tier 3 and 4. This
is a really interesting solution to creating a casual ban list that tries to make as many cards playable. I think this is very smart. I do also like the Canadian Highlander point system, but I think that works much better with a very tournament, competitive focused audience.
I think this was a safe choice to make it accessible to casual player. Now we'll see how big the list is, right?
Well, and Aaron Forsyth came out and said, look, at tier 1 and 2, we're probably not going to be able to have a comprehensive list of cards. 3 and 4, he's saying we're going to be much more exact.
Because those are the players that are going to actually be paying attention.
And they're going to be the ones that are playing to the ceiling, I think, right? I don't think you're going to get nearly as many people who are well, I play at the ceiling of tier 2. Maybe you do. I don't know. But
probably.
But if that ceiling also is less apparent, right? Because we're saying, okay, look, these are generally the cards that we want and the play patterns that we want at these tiers. You're not necessarily saying, hey, here's the cards that we banned, and anything that remotely looks like them is not banned but should be.
Right. Yeah.
The signpost thing. Never worked. Any rate, I don't know. Final thoughts?
I'm very surprised that they said it's going to be ready potentially ready by MagicCon Vegas.
That seems crazy.
That
doesn't
is
seem
3
like
weeks
reality.
from now, a little more than 3 weeks from now, which makes me think there's no way they haven't been thinking about
They've been
this.
thinking about this, I think. Yeah.
For a while now.
Yeah.
Now, and then, we'll see what that means for Foundations. Foundations is going to have a lot of Commander stuff, not to be too tinfoil hat, but awfully coincidental that all this is happening just before they're about to have a sort of refresh
Here's
set.
Magic. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is interesting. We'll see.
We'll see.